How you're using AI to make storytelling and PR more effective.
We've built a visibility platform that uses an AI publicist. We actually help them create pitches. The software actually connects them.
How can organizations strategically use this human-in-the-loop approach to maximize the value of their AI initiatives?
When they're able to identify bottlenecks, audit their time, review their schedules, see what parts of their work can be optimized by AI, and then implement those tools, they're able to work human and AI in tandem to get results more quickly.
What opportunities does this AI-first approach offer businesses? Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of PureLogics Pulse, a podcast powered by PureLogics, where we explore technology trends, product innovation, and digital transformation. PureLogics is a full-service technology partner helping enterprises and startups drive digital transformation, build next-generation software products, and scale AI-powered solutions that create real business impact. I am Ahmed Khalid, and I'm Technical Project Manager at PureLogics. Joining us today is Katie Passarello, a strategist who understands that authenticity is a high-yield asset. Katie is a leader at the intersection of marketing and mission-driven growth, specializing in building narratives that don't just reach people, they move them. Currently, she is the co-founder and chief operating officer of PitchWell, the platform revolutionizing PR by making it as accessible and intuitive as Canva. Our track record is a masterclass in scaling human influence. In just 18 months, she built a powerhouse agency model from the ground up, growing and managing a team of account specialists for a high-tier portfolio. Her strategies have landed clients in the world's most prestigious rooms, from Forbes and Newsweek to national broadcast on CBS, NBC, and ABC. With a background in international relations, she looks at branding through the lens of global dynamics and social value. Today, we are talking about what chatbots can't replicate about human-led brand storytelling. Katie Passarello, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, what a flattering introduction. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited for our conversation. We've got some really interesting things to go through with how much things are changing in business and artificial intelligence and tech. I think we could probably be here all afternoon. So I'm excited to even just talk for a couple of minutes to go through all the things. So thanks for having me.
That's so nice to hear from you. So Katie, can you share a bit about your journey and what inspired you to start PitchWell?
Yeah, absolutely. You gave a really great overview of sort of how I got to where I am today, but just as sort of a brief background, we run a full service PR agency. So for the past 5 years, we've been in the trenches on the PR side, as you've mentioned, getting really important thought leaders and brands published in some of the leading publications, anywhere from Forbes to Business Insider, Fast Company, Wall Street Journal, you name it, we've been there. And what we've noticed is that there's this huge black box for PR. There's a plethora of brands, founders, thought leaders who need to show up. They have important stories. They're building incredible companies, but for many reasons, they're not able to access PR, whether it's because it's a giant retainer. It can be anywhere between $30,000 and $75,000. Or because of the time suck. Doing it on your own is very challenging, right? It's a black box in the sense that people don't really know exactly how to access PR to connect with the media. And so while we were working really well with our agency, we wanted to provide a solution that would actually allow founders to learn PR, access PR, connect with journalists, podcast hosts, etc., without the bank-breaking retainer. So that's really where PitchWell has come in. So over the past 8 months, we've built PitchWell. So the agency we've had for as you mentioned, 80 months, a couple of years. However, the PitchWell product that we've built with our software engineer, we've been working on since May. And so what that has done is it's actually created a system for founders and thought leaders to access PR without having to totally commit to an agency for, 6 to 8 months.
Very nice to hear that, Katie. Can you tell us what PitchWell does and how you're using AI to make storytelling and PR more effective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, PR is a bit of a black box. And so, what that means is that it's very hard to understand what to do, right? You might know that you have an important story, a story that you want to be told, but if you don't know how to connect with right decision makers, that story kind of remains in the dark. So at PitchWell, we're democratizing access to visibility. So what that means is that we've built a visibility platform that uses an AI publicist named Winsley, that's our proprietary AI, to help subject matter experts. So that could be a founder, it could be a practitioner, it could be a project manager who has a lot to say. We actually help them create pitches so they can refine their expert speaking topics. They can then connect with journalists and TV producers. The software actually connects them. So taking the content of their pitch or their idea, it says, hey, by the way, you should reach out to John at Forbes or Amanda at Business Insider. And so they're able to kind of refine their ideas, put them in a pitch status, and then actually send them off. So the platform really guides them from the idea generation through the pitching and then even following up with the media. And it's all connected through an existing Google account. So they're able to really own that relationship with the journalist or the podcast host.
And what is the most exciting way you have seen a brand use AI to amplify, not replace, a truly human story this year?
Yeah, I think it's important what you're mentioning about this idea that you can use AI to amplify as opposed to replace, right? So that human story is still so central to the way that we communicate as brands, as the way that we communicate even as individuals, like the conversation that we're having now. And we're actually seeing it happen right inside of PitchWell. So as an example, just this week, we had a user reach out. She reached out to me specifically with a really exciting update that she had used PitchWell to reach out to some local press. So she's an interior designer, so her local market is incredibly important for lead generation, for the clients that she works with. And after an interview with a local paper, so she sat down in PitchWell and said, I want to connect with the local media. And so she built out her story idea, she pitched the local media, and she actually had an interview, and she showed up in a local paper, and a builder reached out to her from the paper and was like, hey, I think we need to collaborate together. I'm a builder, you're a designer. You're almost the next logical step for our clients that we're building for. So now she has a key power partner for lead generation. And ironically, she had actually reached out to that builder. I don't know if it was this same year, maybe last year, and they didn't get back to her. But after they read her story in a local newspaper, they reached out and were like, we need to collaborate. So when brands can use storytelling as a way to connect with their audiences or even potential power partners, they're kind of able to move the needle. And so using AI in the form of PitchWell, for example, they can get that done because instead of having to write everything on their own, figure out how to talk to, the AI actually takes it one step further for them so they can do it more quickly.
Okay, I have one important question coming into my mind. Many AI agents are trained on human experiences, such as testing, feedback, and real world interactions, enabling them to deliver smarter, more personalized outcomes. How can an organization strategically use this human in the loop approach to maximize the value of their AI initiatives?
I really like how you call it human in the loop. I haven't heard that before. Maybe it's a common term, but first time I'm hearing it and I really like it. So I feel like there's a lot of fear mongering about AI and that, AI is going to replace humans, but ultimately human creativity to me feels like that's what drives productive AI tools. Right. And so when we work with small business owners every single day. And so what we've noticed is that when they're able to integrate AI tools successfully, what they end up doing is freeing up their own time to do their things more effectively. So if you're a project manager, maybe showing up on a call every 3 days to have to update your team about what's going on isn't a very productive use of your time. So if you're able to use an AI tool that helps you summarize the status of your projects and send automatically, you've now saved maybe 3 hours of meetings and you're able to focus in on your building as opposed to sending meetings. And so what we've seen is that, businesses both big and small, when they're able to identify bottlenecks, audit their time, review their schedules, see what parts of their work can be optimized by AI, and then implement those tools, they're able to work human and AI in tandem to get results more quickly, as opposed to having to do all the things manually on their own.
So, in a world powered by AI and synthetic media, how can enterprises use their authentic, unfiltered voice alongside AI tools to amplify their impact and create a unique competitive advantage?
So I don't know if you've seen the recent study that came out by Graphite IO. So they actually just published that more than 50% of articles that are written now are written by AI and not humans, which means that our AI generated content has officially surpassed our human generated content from like an article standpoint. But what I do think is important to point out about that is that most of those articles, that content is owned media channels. So that means like a blog that's hosted on your own website, or maybe a Substack that you own, or a LinkedIn newsletter that you circulate. And so third-party credibility, which means being featured on a podcast or quoted in an article or featured in a magazine, these types of media are still not synthetic. Journalism is very rigorous. So there's background checks that happen for interviews. There's live calls to check for authenticity. And so there's a really high standard of care and execution. So in the age of AI, this third-party credibility in media is really important because it cuts through the noise. So instead of saying, I'm the very best, read it on my blog, when somebody else says, hey, look, they're the best, it calls attention in a different way. And so I think that that's a really important point of it. And that, third-party credibility can be time-consuming, it can be expensive, but when you use AI, you're able to refine your messaging so that you do it more quickly without having something be completely just AI regurgitated. And so you can kind of collapse that time and connect more quickly with the right decision makers in the media when you use AI tools such as PitchWell or others.
Katie, you have worked in social impact where trust is everything. In 2026, what is the one proof of life metric a leader should track to ensure their storytelling is actually resonating?
So that's a really interesting question. Storytelling at the end of the day isn't something that has always been trackable, right? Like word of mouth. I like to think of storytelling and like word of mouth sort of in parallel. So it's hard to track word of mouth because you tell your friend who tells their cousin, who tells their mom, who tells their dad, who then buys a product or uses a service, right? And so it's a very hard thing to track. And with that in mind, there are still ways that you can kind of pay attention to that. So we work very closely with thought leaders who are looking to build their personal brand in tandem with their business. So we actually look at several metrics. We're curious about the engagement on their content. So if it's an owned channel, right? So if it's their own Instagram or their own LinkedIn, we don't pay attention as much to followers, but we look at kind of that ratio of follower increase alongside of engagement. Because if there's a huge spike in followers, but there's not a big change in engagement in terms of like comments and likes over, 6 to 9 posts, for example, then there's probably a bunch of bots that have slid into the follows. On the reverse, if you have one specific piece of content that goes viral, but then you don't have any changes in your followers, or it only happens once, then you're not seeing that thought leadership actually drive the bottom line, which means increases in that visibility over time. So we like to look at those in ratio to each other, right? So like what's happening with the followers in addition to what's happening with the actual engagement on content for owned content. For that third-party credibility with like podcast guesting, with showing up in the media, that we want to see consistent mentions. So by mentions, I mean you're quoted in Business Insider or you're featured on PureLogics podcast. So things like that, right? And we want to see that metric kind of stay consistent because that means that you're showing up, and the media should hopefully build on each other so that it's not like, okay, a press release, we have a ton of interest and then we have no interest. We want to see a consistent sort of feature across time. So are you consistently showing up in the media? and then also that ratio for followers and engagement.
As someone building at the intersection of PR and AI, what gives you the most hope about what humans and technology can achieve together in brand storytelling?
This is a really, really cool question. Again, I just in general, I love that you're taking a positive approach to this. I think it's easy to get kind of like caught up in like, oh no, the world is ending because of AI. So thanks for your positive thoughts. So we're talking about storytelling. We're talking about brand storytelling. We're talking about humans and tech kind of working together. Storytelling, and this is what we're doing right now, you and I, storytelling is one of the most fundamentally human habits. Right? It transcends cultures, it transcends time zones, it transcends many, many, many things, right? And it's really how our species has learned, it's how it's laughed, it's how it's cried, it's how we've carried on traditions for centuries. And so the only thing that has changed is the way that it has been delivered. And that's not new to AI, right? I mean, previously storytelling happened, there were paintings on cave walls. And then at another point in time, there were telephones. You could pick up the telephone and tell a story, which collapsed time, right? Because now, instead of having to wait for lunch on Sunday, you could pick up the phone and call your aunt and tell her the news, right? And so the way that we've told stories has changed over time, but storytelling has remained fundamental. And so what excites me about something like PitchWell is that an AI tool makes it easier. It makes it easier than ever for people to actually tell those stories. And so just this month, actually, within PitchWell, we launched something called Pitch for Good, which means that for every business or thought leader who joins the platform, we're giving away a free lifetime subscription to a nonprofit or a veteran-owned business. Because we recognize that media representation is not equitable right now. So even though storytelling is very important, right now, what's happening is that the people with the biggest mouths and the deepest pockets are the ones who are getting the microphone. And we're here to change that because we think that storytelling should be for everybody, regardless of how much money you can spend on a PR agency or how much time you kind of heckle a journalist to get in their next article. So storytelling should be for everybody. And I think AI lets that happen. It kind of levels the playing field and is giving everybody an opportunity to share their voice.
With the rise of AI agents, could we see websites and apps designed primarily for AI interactions rather than for human users? What opportunities does this AI first approach offer businesses?
I think that the most real example of this that I have noticed, and it's happening, right? Like we're talking about the future of these sort of like platforms for AI to interact with each other. And I think there are some tools that actually do that already. I'm not, our software engineer would probably be able to answer this question better than I can. However, what I have noticed as being like a very applicable example of this is the experiential, like agentic UX. So that's where user interfaces and digital workflows are being redesigned so that AI agents can actually interact directly with the systems. So whether that's like an API or through structured data, as opposed to traditional screens or menus that are aimed at humans. For example, even just the way that we promote something for humans, we're now thinking about it through an AI lens. So when I say that, what I mean is what we're doing on the PR side is I want this brand to show up in the press because I think it's important. Right? Because it's going to lead to more leads. It's going to add more credibility. It gives them more visibility. But now I'm also thinking about, okay, but what publication allows LLMs to scrape its data? Because I also want my brand to show up in those LLMs. So we're already building for AI. And so that agentic UX is like doing that. So we're actually building for AI as opposed to building for humans. But I think that the meta is that it still kind of comes back to promoting something human. So a web designer, for example, who optimizes a brand's website to better be scraped by AI. But why is it doing that? So that it can still show up for other humans.
Okay. Before we sign off, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I hope that listeners kind of take away some good tips and tricks about sort of what the state of AI is. But, I think as we sort of talked about at the very beginning, chatbots can't replicate human-led brand storytelling. However, we should be using them as tools because they ultimately allow us to move faster, they collapse time, they help us get from point A to point B. And so I think having a positive outlook about how we can use those tools as opposed to being scared of them is a really important piece to the puzzle. So I'm glad we're talking about that today.
Even with a good prompt, it can't replicate humans.
Exactly. It's just taken what it knows from what it's been trained from humans to then regurgitate back to humans.
Right. Okay. Hey, Katie, thank you for bringing the insight and the energy today. And to everyone listening to PureLogics Pulse, keep building, keep innovating, and we'll catch you the next wave.